Now, I actually was trying to determine whether or not I should do my formal presentation or just speak to you from my heart in terms of how I see issues, because I do have a nice formal presentation. But let me just observe protocol immediately by recognizing the outstanding job of the chairman of the Constituency Council. Report well delivered, sir. Good evening to all members of the council. Good evening to residents of St. Philip South, members of the media, everyone here this afternoon. I note that Cedric, who is my friend of many years, has said that the act requires I be invited. He seemed to be suggesting that indeed, that were it not for the act, maybe I would not have been invited. But I'm sure that the chairman would have seen that I would have received an invitation in any event. One of the things that Cedric said to you just now was that I have been very hands-off with respect to the council. From inception, my position was that the Constituency Council was an idea that had to work for the betterment of Barbadians. And the only way for it to be embraced by all Barbadians was if we ensured that it was as apolitical as possible. And you would have probably heard me said some time ago that I didn't interfere in terms of the choices of the members, that I will embrace whoever they are once they're involved in community activity. And over the last 18 months to 20 months, I have done exactly that. I have observed, I have interacted, but never once have I tried to dictate what the council should do. And therefore, I'm extremely proud when I listen to Mr. Lawler's report and note the wide-ranging areas of activities that they have been involved in over the last 18 months. Obviously, as a Member of Parliament, I have been informed, or I have initiated some contact where necessary. But looking at the presentation, I'm sure the residents of St. Philip South can be heartened in terms of recognizing that, in fact, that the council has been at work over the last 18 months. I am one who I don't believe in committees. I don't believe in spending lots of time trying to determine what needs to be done. I actually believe in going out and getting things done. And in that regard, therefore, I recognize many of the initiatives of the council. One of the initiatives, I believe that Mr. Lord, you and the members would recall, that even before I had responsibility for the Ministry of Home Affairs, that I invited you to embrace the District Emergency Organization in St. Philip South. I was not convinced that we were as equipped as we should be if we were to respond to a hurricane or other natural disaster. And then, of course, Thomas came along in October last year, which further strengthened my resolve and further, no doubt, strengthened yourself as council members in the view that, in fact, that the Constituency Council and the St. Philip South DEO has to embrace each other and work together to ensure that we can respond whenever there is an emergency of any type. One of the challenges that we had after Thomas is that we had the DEO going down, say, to the DM to collect material. We had the council members also involved, and there wasn't as a coordinating a response as I would have liked, and I believe that as you would have liked. And no doubt one of the things that we're going to do very soon is sit down with the DEO and ensure that, in fact, that we have a coordinated response if ever we have an emergency again. As you know, my ministry has responsibility for the Thomas relief effort, and I note that the chairman mentioned the fact that in some areas that relief had been slow in coming. We have in fact received 1,000 reports of damage, and obviously you have to start somewhere. There is some limitation in terms of access to funding initially. We reckon that, in fact, that the rebuilding process will be completed in October this year, given the realities in terms of what needs to be accomplished. With respect to the residents of St. Philip South impacted, obviously I will ensure, as Minister responsible, that as much relief as possible comes to St. Philip South, and that has in fact started. When you drive around St. Philip South, you will no doubt have noticed that quite several houses are under repairs of one kind or another, and indeed there have been several new houses which have been constructed as a result of these efforts. So, Mr. Lord, you'll be happy to hear that, in fact, that it is being addressed. But I go back to the most substantive point in the sense of the role that I believe that the council has to play along with the DEO to ensure that if we do have an emergency of any kind going forward, that we can lead the way. I am heartened that we are moving in the direction of having a container that we will store some material in. But I've also challenged the council to ensure that we have a generator. I've also challenged you to ensure that we have an independent water supply at Rice's, because what you want to be able to do and what I want you to be able to do is to be as self-sufficient as possible, so that you can respond if we're out of electricity, if we're out of water in the community, that in fact that you can respond, and that the residents of St. Philip South will in fact know that they can come to Rice's where you're based, and that some action will be taken. So I do hope that you will give that some priority over the next couple of weeks, because the hurricane season is upon us again. Part of the reason why I've gone away from giving a formal presentation is because this afternoon really is about the work of the council. And I want you to focus on the work of the council. I want the media to focus on the work of the council, because the St. Philip South Council has been indeed a success story. Mr. Lord mentioned that on one occasion there was some suggestion that in fact that all persons were doing was walking around the community and not bringing meaningful relief. Now, if we use, for example, the whole issue of the wells that have been done in certain parts of the constituency, it was not just even a case of ensuring that there was proper drainage. We also discovered that there were some wells that didn't have covers at all. And we took a decision that in fact that this was an untenable situation that needed to be addressed. Regrettably, we had a situation, or we still have a situation in the constituency where wells were done, and I can only say of inferior quality, because they caved in quite quickly, and we sought to address it. We have some challenges in terms of the programs that the council would like to take on, because as we know, everything takes money. Which brings me actually to one cry that I'm sure that the council will want me to echo on their behalf, which is the importance of encouraging more residents to volunteer. We need more volunteers in the true sense of the word, not volunteers who will come back to us and say, well, you haven't paid me for my time, but volunteers who really would come out. We recognize that is a sacrifice. Let me give you a simple example. Just last weekend, I met with a constituent who said to me that she has some difficulty taking a bath by herself. So she depends on a neighbor who is not always available, or one of her relatives who's not always available. And that's a simple illustration in terms of how we can use volunteerism to bring meaningful relief to constituents. Because she shouldn't have to sit down and wait and wonder who's going to come along and help her with a bath, something that we take for granted ourselves. Right? And another example is someone who says to me that in fact, because of her difficulty with walking, that she has to pay someone to take her to the hospital twice a month. And she says to me, well, Mr. Brathwaite, quite often or not, time I'm finished paying him, it means that I have challenges in terms of buying my food, etc., etc. There is no reason why we shouldn't be able to be creative enough to have a program that we can bring relief to an individual like that. But we need more volunteers, and I think what we also need, from the council's perspective, is that we probably need to go back out again in terms of our needs assessments, so that we can clearly categorize all the individuals, like the two that I've mentioned, where in fact that we can bring immediate relief to them. I know that in both cases I've found a remedy, but the point though is that a government will not always be able to intercede, and that's where I'm urging the council, and that's where I'm urging members of the public generally in St. Philip South to let us volunteer more and help those in our community who is less fortunate. I also want to challenge the council this afternoon to be more creative in its programs during the next year from this perspective. There is a skills deficiency in St. Philip South. In fact, there may be a skills deficiency in Barbados, but let us deal with St. Philip South. There's a skills deficiency in St. Philip South. I see too many young men and women who come to me on Wednesdays without any qualifications and without any skills. And we need to address this. Now, if I use the Thomas experience, believe it or not, one of the things that we have been hearing from the Rural Development Commission and the Urban Development Commission is the lack of carpenters who are available to assist with the relief. And I met, for example, last Saturday, a young man in Diamond Valley who said to me that he was a carpenter and a mason. I said, well, and that he wasn't working. I said to him, well, how is it possible that you can't be working? Because of this deficiency, which is obviously out there. And if you don't believe that there's a skills deficiency, based on my word, the fact is that it's not by accident that when the construction industry in Barbados was really booming, that in fact that we had to bring labor into Barbados. Now, what I want you to do, Council, is to use this opportunity to train some of our young people so that they can address this one deficiency that I've highlighted, for example, in terms of the lack of carpenters, and I probably will add masons. But the point, though, is that I want you to find ways for us to teach skills to our young people so that, in fact, that they can be better off down the road.